Welcome to my channel, This Awkward Life. So today I'm going to be talking to you guys about a book list that I think every parent should look through or know, and I'm going to show you some very specific pieces of that. I was just going to post this on my Facebook page, but after I started going through it and deciding what I all wanted to talk about on this book list, I realized it was going to be really long, so I decided to do a YouTube video on it. This is for non-homeschoolers and homeschoolers alike. If you're worried about what your kids are reading and you want to get your kids good books, these lists are amazing. So I'm going to go through, there are two different lists that I have printed out. The first one is a book list of good books, and this is from a homeschool website, The Good and the Beautiful, but you do not have to homeschool to use these lists. Nothing like that. They're just a list of good books, and I will go through and share how they rate their good books in a minute here. But I also wanted to stop and say they have, and this actually list is more important to me personally, they have a list of bad books, and after reading through them they give why they're bad, whatever. And I was shocked at the number of books that we have on this list, and I'm kind of embarrassed by it. So I'm going to go through it and I'm going to show you all of those things, why they're bad. There is some that is not necessarily bad, but they're like questionable, and as a parent you can decide the moral stories or the immoral parts that your kids are getting in books. So maybe they don't have necessarily a terrible message, but they don't necessarily have a good message. You as a parent can decide whether that's a book you want to read your kids. But instead of having to sit down and read every single book you want your kids to read or every single book they bring home, obviously they're not going to have every single book on here, but it is a great starter list to be like, yeah, it says it has this in there and I'm not comfortable with you reading that. Or if you want to go the opposite way, you could be like, all right, you can read that book, but it has these things in it, and when you're done with this book, we're going to discuss them and why, that was right or wasn't right in the book. So to get started, I'm going to show you that. I base my reviews on the following standards. If I believe the book goes against any of these standards, I do not recommend the book. This does not mean the book does not also contain a good message or have good qualities. Almost all books, wholesome or not, have some positive message and qualities. So the list is 1, avoids all uses of profanity and taking God's name in vain. 2, avoids violence that is graphic or used for entertainment or shock value. 3, does not weaken the family, faith, or Christ-like behavior. And 4, does not portray bad behavior or weak character traits as humorous, entertaining, normal, or acceptable. This includes laziness, negativity, flippant attitude, disrespect, cruelty, violence, gossip, pride, vanity, self-centeredness, revenge, greed, worldliness, unkindness, immodesty, immorality, lack of depth of character, making fun of teachers or education or family members. All right, so that's just kind of like a preview onto what they put in the list. And then this part I also found super interesting. So this talks about roller coaster books, and these books are neither bad nor good books, and I'm going to read you the paragraph she said about that. Roller coaster books contain little to no objectionable material, but are not on the Good and the Beautiful list because they contain little to no moral, literary, or educational value. These books may be fine to read occasionally, just like riding a roller coaster may occasionally be fine, but they offer little more than fun and thrill. I believe that children who grow up on a steady diet of roller coaster books are affected in negative ways. Constantly reading stories that are all about fun, thrill, adventure, friends, excitement, etc. can result in viewing life as all about those things. A child may develop a more shallow character and less desire to seek knowledge and learning, while also seeking instantly gratifying entertainment. Just like we want our kids to eat fruits and vegetables and nutritious foods for a strong body, we want them to read books of value for a strong mind and character. So to go on, I'm going to start down here, and it talks about the Hardy Boys series. This is something I and my brothers read as kids, and I would probably let my kids read these when they get a little bit older, and I'm going to go over that in a minute, but I'm going to start with what they say on it. The literary, educational, and moral value of these books is only okay. According to another reviewer, the original first 58 contain little to no objectionable material or content. But after book 58, Simon and Schuster began publishing new Hardy Boy mysteries that were not actually written by Dixon. Reviewers say these new books from number 58 and on contain objectionable material. One reviewer said, "I was appalled at how rude nearly all the people in the books were, including the title characters. I recommend sticking to the first 58 original books, but also note that many of our customers choose not to read these books because of some of the darker themes, and I did personally come across one book that talks about voodoo." They also talk about the Nancy Drew books in here and how the pen name Carol Lynn Keene was used by many different authors, and the ones that were good in the series and the ones that were bad in the series. There was also a series that I stumbled across that was like Nancy Drew in college when I was a kid that I brought home, and it was highly, highly inappropriate. So definitely would avoid those, but as far as like the original Nancy Drew books, I'm okay with them. And so Aubrey will probably read those when they're older, but I like how they're included in this as it shows you which ones are specifically good and which ones are specifically bad. And then there are the section of clean books with magical elements. So some people don't like their kids reading books that include magic. So they have this in here if you are okay with it. But you want a very specific and clean books. So for instance, on this list is Charlotte's Web, which is obviously considered a classic. So it says that the book is clean and explores the topics of kindness, friendship, loss, and hope. The book does contain some magical elements. All of the animals also talk to each other, though not to humans. So it does go through some of those magical books. It also has The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe in here, The Princess and the Curdle, The Princess and the Goblin, The Three Toy Makers, and then this is not on the book list. So this is the list of books that they do not recommend to people that are bad. And the first one that kind of surprised me is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Many people talk about this book and it's considered, I guess, a classic, but on here under the category parents may or may not care about the following items in this book, they write that it takes the Lord's name in vain and it contains profanity. This one, A Bird in Winter, a children's book inspired by Peter Bruegel the Elder, probably murdered that. It says parents may or may not like about the following items in this book, contains a negative portrayal of parents. So when you read through this, it gives many different reasons why you may or may not like it. This one takes God's name in vain. It also includes behaviors such as belching, farting, and name calling as funny. And then there's, as you can see, just a ton. I'm going to skip forward to a few more popular ones. So some of them on this one contains name calling between siblings made to look funny and acceptable. Impatience and sarcasm made to look acceptable. Main character shows low character, sneaks out of the house knowing it is wrong in order to get out of work and to see something she knows her mom would not let her see. The actions are not corrected, and this is Joanne Lowry Nixon. Oh, that's the author. I think it's Anne's story. I can't really tell because I accidentally put a hole punch through it. Down here, this one says has an anti-Christian bias. And then Astrid the Unstoppable contains tobacco use, contains some mild name calling, contains disrespect to adults. One of the main characters has a child out of wedlock. So we have this one. It is Captain Underpants. It's not something that I would have gotten for her, but we do have it because it was given to us, and she does like the book, but we are going to go through these with her, the ones that we have, and I'm going to talk to her about like what it says in here and be like, hey, when you read it, did all this stuff happen? And she will say yes or no, and then we'll read through the book if she says no, and so I can point it out to her, like what they're talking about, and then if she says yes, and then we will discuss, you know, how even though she enjoys the books, that things we enjoy aren't always good. So promotes disrespect, low character, and potty humor, portrays degrading attitude towards girls, contains terrible grammar, and filled with intentionally misspelled words. One reviewer wrote, "These awful books are menacing and delinquent kids who disrupt school, destroy school property, and disrespect teachers and others. There are no redeeming qualities of these books, and bad behavior has no bad consequences. They are rallied as heroes in the end." Obviously not something I want portrayed to my kids. And then cheaper by the dozen, takes the Lord's name in vain. Obviously, I have different values than a lot of you may be reading these. Some of these things may not be a big deal to you. Some of these were pretty astonishing to me because when I bring home books from the library, or my kids bring home books, I don't necessarily think about a kid's book having some of these things in them, but the fact that these are snuck into my kids' books kind of bothers me. And I like how it goes through all the little things. Some of these things may seem little to some people that they're in here. Other people, it'll be a big deal, but I love that they have this list so you can go through and see exactly what your kid is reading and what's going to be contained into these books without having to sit down and read all of these books. I'm just going to try and find a few more popular ones. There was a couple more that we actually have in our library that I was going to share with you. So this one, The Diary of the Wimpy Kid, I had heard was pretty bad, and I had never planned on letting Aubrey read them. But in case you haven't heard or are just curious, this sums up what is bad about them. Chock full of potty humor, name-calling, bad-mouth attitudes, whining, bullying presented as funny, poor choices that show no negative consequences, laziness depicted as funny and desirable, terrible disrespect to family, parents, and teachers. A reviewer wrote, "This is the junk food of books for children, immediately satisfying, yet in the end, a pollutant causing distaste for that which helps them in the end. This is shallow, simple writing that actually discourages intellectual curiosity and makes other books seem boring. I wholeheartedly disagree with the statement that it turns reluctant readers into readers. The only thing this has done for my reluctant readers, I am a 5th grade teacher, is make them whine about reading anything else. We need to be wise about our choices with what we feed our children's minds, just as much as their bellies. Both can either be fruitful and life-giving or actually lower their quality of life." So I thought that was a very interesting review from a 5th grade teacher. They also had this section of books about George Washington, and they put different ones. If you're looking for a more educational one, they say about this one, "After a deep study of the original documents by and about George Washington, we do not feel that everything in this book was truthful," so just something to keep in mind. So they have a few things to say about these different books about George Washington. And then George Washington's Breakfast contains disrespectful behavior made to look funny and acceptable. So these are the last two series that I'm going to talk about, and then we will switch to the next list in the book. The Judy Moody series I know is pretty popular. Main character is not a good role model, displays selfishness, negative towards siblings, mood swings, rudeness, disrespect, jealousy, and unkindness, which are presented as funny, entertaining, or acceptable. Extremely low literary value. And then lastly, the Judy B Jones series. So Aubrey was given these and said she liked them, and so I actually got her some more. Apparently I should have pre-read them. So it's void of literary or moral value. Writing is poor and intentionally filled with grammatical mistakes. I run, I sended, etc. Unacceptable attitudes and behaviors presented as funny, filled with snooty attitudes, bullying, disobedient, poor choices, defiance, and disrespect. Reviewer writes, Judy B Jones is basically a little brat who talks way too much, stamps her foot when angry, and openly disobeys her parents. Her mom constantly scolds her, but never actually punishes her bad behavior. Basically everything that many of us have come to think of as wrong with permissive parenting and public school peer socialization is exemplified in Judy B Jones' books. Because these books are so widely read in classrooms, you may want to ask your teacher if the class plans on reading them. It is very hard to keep your children away from these books in public school. So that is the last one as far as not on this book list that I'm going to talk about. Again, we have these, and I am going to sit down with Aubrey and talk about that here shortly. But I'm going to skip to the book list of good books. The Good and the Beautiful book list. I will link this down below so you guys can download it if you want. You download it, and then you have the 3 different options to download the good book list, the bad book list, etc. So on here it talks about, again, the book and standards in which they need to have for them to put them on here. And then it goes by level. So over here it has the different what it's about. So basically, if you were to read the back of the book, they have it in here so you can read what it's about to see if it's something that would interest your child. And I'm just going to go back because there's a section on how points work, because they give a point setting for each book. Each book is assigned points based on moral merit, literary merit, and educational value. Merit ratings are based on a scale from 0 to 5. A lower rating of moral merit does not mean the book is inappropriate. All the Good and the Beautiful books are deemed appropriate and wholesome, but some books have more emphasis on moral principle than others. Note, literary merit is based on reading level of each book. So that kind of talks about it. So we're going to come back here and we're just going to pick the first book on the series. Beginner book box set. And it says moral merit is a 4, literary merit for level 4, and then educational value is a 4. So then we're going to flip back here. Kate Shelley and the Midnight Express. Moral merit is a 4, literary merit is a 3.5, and educational value is a 4. And then over here as a description they just put, this is a wonderful true story about a courageous girl who prevented a train wreck. I love the messages about prayer, selflessness, and courage. This short book also has a great educational value. This one is Kidlick's Kayak. Kidlick and his younger brother, Taktu, are excited to make the long journey by themselves to the ice ceilings grounds of the Arctic to hunt for provisions for their family. Come along on this exciting story of Kidlick, no longer a little boy, seeks to prove himself and battles the dangers that await. Moral merit is 3, literary merit for level 4, and educational value is a 5. So they have all sorts of different ones in here, and this one is pretty self-explanatory. I'm not going to go through and read all of them, but it definitely has a lot of good ideas in here. We're going to use this as idea to rent some books for Aubrey to read this school year. They have Little House on the Prairie books. I'm sure some of you recognize those, or probably all of you. Moral merit is a 5, literary merit for a level 5, and educational value is also a 5. So again, it was kind of embarrassing for me to share that. I obviously have not been super diligent about pre-reading or what she's been reading, so we will figure that out, and we will move forward hopefully with a better book list. But just as a parent, it is so hard to know every single book your kid's reading or pick up, or that someone like gives them, or they go to the library and they bring it home. It is very hard to keep track of all those books and what's in them, especially if you hadn't read them as a child and you just don't know. Just a great starter book. Some of those books are for really young kids that are using profanity and the Lord's name in vain, and those were things that I did not know. Like when I send my kids into the kids section of you know, the library, I don't necessarily think we're worried about ever bringing home books that contain that, because I just assume they're in the kids section, so they're not going to be that way. Definitely not true. Some of those books on those lists even included, and I tried to save it out, but I must have lost it, like a book that included like a graphic description of like a rape scene in like one of the mysteries. I can't remember which one it is. It's in there someplace. So those are things obviously I don't want Aubrey reading. So anyways, that's all for me today. I really hope you guys stuck through and watched this video. I honestly don't care if anybody else watches any of my other videos. I just really hope that if you're a parent and you're a friend of mine, that you really watch this video, because it was super eye-opening for me finding those pages, and I hope me sharing them was slightly eye-opening to you. I will try and link the list down below so you guys can download it. Again, it is on a homeschooling website. It is not specifically for homeschoolers. It is for any parent who wants a say and to know what their kid is reading and what kind of values their child is getting out of their books. So again, if you like this video, be sure to like it, and if you would like to subscribe, that would definitely help my channel. Thank you.